A church is more than just a building, but that said, there are some immediate architectural features you'd expect to see when you step into the house of Christian worship. The vaulted ceilings, the elongated stained glass windows, a sense of structural impressiveness that inspires awe and reverence. But what if you were trying to start a new global church on a shoestring budget? Jake Zabel is a pastor at what must be very close to the smallest church in Australia, the St John's Evangelical Lutheran Church in Dalby, which is basically a single-room, converted construction site office with a crucifix on the wall. And Pastor Jake is on a mission to spread his word across the oceans.
Just worksite, office, outdoor donga kind of things, and it's pretty small. We've basically got an altar up the front, and we've got a little pew set up, just mainly for the family here to sit on. My lead services up the front. The
stereotypical view of a church is a sandstone building, one that's been around for quite a while. To have a church within essentially a donga is something a little bit unusual or different. Was that born out of necessity, Jake, given you are a relatively small Christian denomination?
So essentially, when we first got started, we were just having services in the lounge room, but we just really wanted to have something that was kind of, separate from the house so that you could have that kind of transition from, this is home time. Especially for the kids, it's just if you're just having church in the lounge room, they just didn't really see much of a difference between it's church time versus what's playtime. So having somewhere that's just separate from the home so that then they could actually be like, okay, now it's time to worship and actually get into that actual reverent kind of state of mind.
Can a donga be a sacred or reverent space? Does it feel like it?
Yeah. I mean, back in the book of Corinthians, they were just gathering in people's homes, and even in the early church, because of the fact of them being persecuted by the Roman government, a lot of times they were meeting in catacombs, which are essentially like underground grave sites. Basically, they were gathering there just to have church. So basically, Jesus says, wherever 2 or 3 gather in his name, there is the church. So, we can be here, we can be in a shed, we could be in a tent on the side of the road and it'd still be church.
You'd have to be one of the, if not the smallest church in Queensland, just looking at pictures of the church you have there in Dalby. But is that not necessarily such an issue, Jake? Because a lot of the pastor work you do, the preaching work you do, is actually for an online audience.
I've got my family, and we've had some neighbours and people like that come along as well for local services. But then, I've every service I've got the laptop set up to video chat it, live stream it to members around the world, and I spend a lot of my time recording my sermons for YouTube and even some online videos, and even been doing some children's videos and stuff. So a lot more of my ministry at this point in time is dedicated to online work.
You're a pastor with the Confessional Orthodox Evangelical Lutheran Communion, which I see from its website has churches in Denmark, PNG, Nigeria, Kenya and Dalby. How did you even get involved with this, arm of the Lutheran faith?
So there's just the stereotypical joke of Lutherans always splitting. There's the idea of the guy who was stuck on an island, and he even by himself on the island had established 3 different churches. So Lutherans are known for kind of going their own ways. I myself was originally part of the main Lutheran Church of Australia, which is just the LCA, and then I had joined up with a smaller group based mostly around Toowoomba and the Lockyer Valley, and things didn't work out there. And I reached out to this online group, and that's how I got in contact to this Danish pastor. They had their own kind of little internal squabbles, and me and the Danish pastor basically decided, we'll try and work our own thing and grow from there. And over the years, we've had a few different people join us. We've had people drop in and out. We've had people in Thailand, Philippines, Japan, America, North and South America drop in and out. And just at the most recently, we've had people in Papua New Guinea, Kenya and Nigeria that have teamed up with us. And I think they'll be a little bit more hopeful because they've got established congregations and pastors there, whereas a lot of the ones in Southeast Asia were similar circumstances to I'm here in Queensland with just the one family in a small location. And it's a bit of a struggle. So not everyone can hold on by themselves for too long, and so people drop in and out.
Hearing from Pastor Jake Zabel. Pastor Jake, so it's essentially you and this other pastor from Denmark trying to establish this new international church from scratch. How much of a challenge is doing something like that?
Well, I'd say quite a lot of a challenge. I mean, first of all, you'll have just the lack of any finances, plus just with the lack of numbers means lack of awareness. So not many people know you exist. Lutherans have known to have splits in the past, but often when that happens, they have at least fully formed, established congregations that at least have something to gather around. We're really like starting off as like kind of two little house churches and trying to grow from that. So we've really been blessed with these new congregations in Africa and Papua New Guinea because they found us online and said, we would like to join you guys.
If the faith grows, though, Jake, would you need to scale up over time?
Yes, I mean, we've even just recently been discussing that because we've had another family joining us here, and it's just already now starting to make it a little bit tight. So I said, well, if we get anyone else coming along, we're just by necessity going to have to get at least a bigger outside donga, if not something bigger than that. What
do you think it is about the Lutheran faith that has seen so many different interpretations or splintering or fracturing over time, and even with yourself? Like, what is it about the subjective experience of the faith that leads to groups, maybe not necessarily feeling aligned to the one interpretation of the Lutheran faith?
Something in the German roots. They just seem to be very kind of argumentative, but Luther had this real dedication to wanting to seek the truth. So I think everybody tends to have their own views of what the truth is. So that leads us to be really passionate about trying to find what is the truth. And then that kind of leads to fights and squabbles and splits.
How many members of the faith do you think there are in Australia, Jake, if you had to estimate?
My church?
Yeah.
I don't have to estimate. Let's see. In Australia, between my local family, and we've got a little mission in Tasmania, in Australia, there's only about 10 of us.
Wow. Well, it would have to be one of, if not the smallest churches in Australia, and yet you say it doesn't really matter how small the building or how big the building is, how extravagant it looks or how minimalistic it looks. It's about what happens within the four walls, not about how the four walls look, that makes a church a sacred place.
Well, basically, as long as God's word is being preached and his holy sacraments of baptism and communion are being given out, that's what's important, and that can happen anywhere.
So what continues you on this path of trying to build this very small church into something bigger?
Martin Luther had this interesting saying back in his days where he says, the devil is a snake. If he can get his head in the door, he can get the rest of his body in too. If I am willing to sacrifice one thing for the sake of numbers and money, then what's going to stop me sacrificing something else? And once I sacrifice one thing, it becomes a slippery slope, and then eventually I'm just doing it for the money, and then I'm not actually even doing it for the sake of saving people's souls anymore. So it's a dedication that I actually want to save people's souls, and I don't want to have to sacrifice anything, even if it means that I have to put up with having, financial insecurity and stuff like that. I think the truth is too important to give it up for just some gold.
And Jake, your church is in Dalby in the Western Downs. We know this part of Queensland, it's a real hotspot for a lot of different offshoots of Christianity. What do you think it is about the area you live in that has so many people of strong faith, particularly the Christian faith?
It does seem to be something with Queenslanders and very much this area of Queensland. I did a video on YouTube about 7 years old now, just looking at all the different Lutheran groups in Queensland. It seems to be the one state where there is the most different branches going on. I don't know, it seems something in our just Queensland way of life where we are very passionate and, I don't know, probably a bit stubborn and thick-headed at times that can lead to us to have a bit more splits.
That was Pastor Jake Zabel from St John's Evangelical Lutheran Church in Dalby on the Western Downs. If it's not the smallest church in Australia, it'd have to be very close to it.